Hello, all you freedom-loving people. Ukraine is closer to peace talks as Putin declares a 3-day truce starting May 8th. So who is at greater risk with the tariffs, the US or China? And a massive explosion wiped out an Iranian port. Okay, let's get into it. On Saturday, President Trump and Ukraine Zelensky both attended Pope Francis's funeral in Rome. So they met at St. Peter's Basilica and chatted for 15 minutes. This is the first time the two have met since the heated clash in the White House's Oval Office in February, and it comes at a critical time in the negotiations to end the conflict in Ukraine. However, the content of the conversation has not been made public. According to information and photos released by Zelensky's office, the two leaders were seated opposite each other in St. Peter's Basilica at the Vatican with no other attendance, but Macron did want to attend. After the meeting, Zelensky said on Saturday that the meeting was of historic significance as it was expected to achieve his desired outcome of peace. Zelensky wrote, "We discussed a lot, one-on-one, hoping for results on everything we covered, protecting lives of our people, full and unconditional ceasefire, reliable and lasting peace that will prevent another war from breaking out. Very symbolic meeting that has potential to become historic if we achieve joint results." A White House spokesperson confirmed that the two leaders met privately and had a very productive discussion. President Trump blamed Russian President Vladimir Putin after the meeting and said that there was no reason for Russia to fire missiles at civilian areas in Ukraine. President Trump wrote, "It makes me think that maybe he doesn't want to stop the war. He's just tapping me along and has to be dealt with differently through banking or secondary sanctions. Too many people are dying." Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov said in a pre-recorded interview that was aired Sunday on CBS's Face the Nation program that Russia will continue to target Ukrainian military sites. When asked about last week's Russian attack on Kyiv that killed civilians, Lavrov said the target of the attack was not civilians and that Russia was only targeting sites used by the military. On Sunday, President Trump told reporters in New Jersey that the meeting with Zelensky was very pleasant and that Zelensky had demanded more U.S. weapons during the 15-minute meeting. President Trump again urged President Putin to stop the attacks and to sit down to sign a peace agreement. President Trump also denied that his relationship with Zelensky had been bad, saying instead that their live streaming debate in February had been a minor obstacle. Speaking of Zelensky, President Trump said, "I see him as calmer. I think he understands the picture, and I think he wants to make a deal." President Trump also said that Zelensky is in a tough spot, a very tough spot. This is because his opponents are more powerful than he is. So Zelensky reiterated his request for weapons. President Trump said, but he's been saying that for 3 years, that he needs more weapons. President Trump did not make it totally clear if he would continue to supply more weapons. He said, "We're going to see what happens. I want to see what happens with respect to Russia." Meanwhile, President Trump expressed his frustration with Russia. He said, "I was very disappointed that missiles were fired by Russia." President Trump also said that he was surprised and disappointed, very disappointed that they did the bombing of those places after discussion. President Trump indicated that Putin needs to show determination to end the war. President Trump told reporters, "Well, I want him to stop shooting, sit down, and sign a deal. We have the confines of a deal, I believe, and I want him to sign it and be done with it." Secretary of State Marco Rubio said that the White House might abandon its attempts to reach a deal if Russia and Ukraine do not make headway. Rubio told NBC it needs to happen soon. "We cannot continue to dedicate time and resources to this effort if it's not going to come to fruition." So in line with lowering the aggression, the Kremlin said on Monday that President Putin unilaterally declared a 3-day ceasefire to mark the 80th anniversary of the end of World War II, and he urged Ukraine to do the same. This is the second time recently that Putin has made such a decision. During Easter, Putin also unilaterally declared a 30-hour truce. Despite immediate skepticism, the Ukrainian side did eventually agree. However, Both sides later accused the other of violating the Easter ceasefire, and Russia ended up launching multiple attacks on Ukraine from a wide front line. This time, Putin's decision for another 3-day truce may be an attempt to signal to President Trump that Russia is still interested in peace. White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt said on Monday that President Trump is increasingly frustrated with Putin and Zelensky and that both sides need to sit down at the negotiating table to end the war. Even though Putin offered a temporary ceasefire on Monday, President Trump made it clear that he's seeking a permanent ceasefire. Let's take a look at whether there is any progress in the U.S.-China tariff war. On the surface, the CCP is the only government in the world that had ignored the U.S. Trump administration's tactics of imposing reciprocal tariffs and pressuring negotiations. But in President Trump's 100-day interview in the April 25th issue of Time magazine, he said that the U.S. government is negotiating with China to reach a tariff deal. He said that the CCP chairman Xi Jinping had called him. However, President Trump did not say when the call was made. He just said that he didn't think it was a sign of weakness on Xi's part. President Trump also recently made public his conditions for lowering China's tariffs.
Secretary Bessent said that you wouldn't drop tariffs on China unilaterally, that you would need to see some kind of movement. What do you want to see from China?
Well, I'm not going to drop them unless they give us something that's, substantial. Otherwise, I'm not going to drop them. But it'll all work out. Those things always work out. We're working on a lot of projects right now. The wall is solved. The border is the most secure it's ever been. We're having a very hard time with judges because they don't want people to be moved out of the country. Shockingly, nobody's ever had this before, no other president. There's never been a time when this has ever become an issue, where they talk about due process, when you have millions of people that you're moving out that are really bad people, very dangerous people, and you have a judge that wants every single one of them to have a trial.
Of course, there are many who think that China has an advantage over the United States. Many analysts have commented that the CCP has been preparing for the U.S. trade war since the election results came out last November. And after all this time of preparation, Beijing has more confidence and options to deal with the new Trump 2.0 tariff measures. There are also many people who do not think so. In an interview on Sunday, Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent said he didn't know if President Trump had spoken to Xi Jinping, but Bessent was confident that the U.S. and China would eventually reach an agreement. This is because, in Bessent's opinion, China cannot afford the 145% tariff that was imposed by the U.S. According to Bessent, China's business model depends on selling cheap, subsidized goods to the United States. If this model is suddenly interrupted, China's economy will also come to a sharp halt, so China will definitely negotiate with the United States. Bill Ackman, a well-known hedge fund manager, also posted an article on Saturday questioning the notion that China can win a trade war. In his article, he begins by stating, "Some have suggested that because China takes a very long-term view, China can win a trade war with the U.S., which, according to the conventional view, is a much shorter-term player than China." Ackman said that the more persistent the high tariffs are, the more likely it is that both U.S. and non-U.S. businesses will lack the confidence to rely on China for sourcing and production in the long term. As a result, the faster companies with supply chains in China will move to India, Vietnam, Mexico, America, and other countries. He hopes that China understands the dynamics of the relationship and thinks that they should be strongly motivated to reach a trade agreement as soon as possible. He pointed out that the tariffs imposed by the United States on Chinese goods will cause great harm in the short term to businesses that rely heavily on Chinese goods or raw materials, especially small companies that lack the capital to weather the storm. The tariffs hurt medium-sized and large companies as well. However, such firms are better financed and will be able to cope with the burden of tariffs before moving out of China. In addition, if the tariffs persist, the U.S. government can provide loans to help companies move out of China. Therefore, with the support of the government, U.S. companies are more capable of resisting the harm of tariffs than Chinese companies. Media reports also confirm Ackman's analysis. As the U.S. imposed significant tariffs on Chinese goods, China's manufacturing sector has been experiencing a rapid loss of export orders, prompting a large number of factories to suspend production. Experts say that the impact is even stronger than the COVID-19 outbreak. In China's key export hubs, many factories have temporarily laid off half of their staff and shut down for a few weeks, with factories of toys, sport goods, and low-priced consumer goods bearing the brunt. The Financial Times reported that with the Trump tariff policy coming into effect, the bookings for 20-foot units, or TEUs, between China and the U.S. dropped by 45% in mid-April compared to the same period last year. The Port of Los Angeles expects that the number of TEUs arriving in early May will drop by 1/3 compared to the same period last year, and the demand for air transportation will fall at the same time. According to Ackman, these circumstances should give the U.S. and China a strong incentive to reduce high tariffs to a more reasonable 10 to 20% as soon as possible, Ackman said in an article. The only thing stopping the reduction in tariffs to a more sensible level is the fear on the part of both countries' leadership of looking weak. But this is an immature understanding. He suggests that both sides could suspend tariffs for 180 days to allow negotiations to take place. He wrote, a pause, however, would not be a sign of weakness because it requires both countries to take down their tariffs. It is just common sense. However, time is on America's side. He also wrote, there is no board of directors or management team who will ever again feel comfortable relying on China for a major portion of their supply chain. The damage has been done. If instead China stubbornly decides to hold out and not negotiate due to pride or other emotional issues, China will suffer much more severe and permanent economic consequences. He concluded by saying that time is the friend of the U.S. and the enemy of China in this negotiation. Shahid Raja'i, a commercial port in the south of Iran, was the scene of a massive explosion and fire on Saturday. Helicopters and airplanes sprayed water down over the harbor from Saturday night until Sunday in an attempt to put out the fire. Iranian state media said that the explosion shattered windows for several kilometers and damaged metal bars on containers, and it severely damaged the cargo inside. And as of Sunday afternoon, the fire had not been fully extinguished. Smoke was still billowing over the blast site, and twisted metal fragments and construction debris were scattered all across the ground. By Sunday night, the fire was under control and the blaze was fully extinguished, but the cause of the accident is a mystery. There have been reports that the explosion was suspected to be linked to chemicals that were shipped from China to make missile propellants. The Associated Press reported that the incident was reportedly related to a batch of chemicals used to make missile propellants. Ambri, a private maritime security company, revealed that the port received the missile fuel chemicals in March. It was part of chemicals from China to Iran, but Iranian authorities have denied this allegation. The Iranian Defense Ministry spokesperson denied reports that Iran was importing missile fuel through the port. However, ship tracking data analyzed by the Associated Press showed that one of the vessels believed to be carrying the chemicals was seen near the port in March, matching the information provided by Ambri. Video footage of Saturday's explosion shows red smoke rising from the flames prior to detonation. This indicates the presence of chemical compounds in the explosion, as in the case of the Beirut explosion. Like many similar incidents in recent years, there have been ambiguities, contradictions, and a lack of media coverage regarding this event. The news is dominated by confusion and speculation, and it is unlikely that full transparency can ever be achieved. So far, Iranian officials have not provided a clear picture of what exactly occurred. Iranian officials have mostly tried hard to portray that there were no chemical materials with military application at the port. They have also tried to portray that the explosion had no connection to missile industry materials. However, the Director General of Crisis Management for the province was the only one who confirmed that the explosion was caused by the explosion of chemical materials that were stored in containers at the port. But he did refrain from providing detailed information about the nature and the use of these chemical materials. He only provided some general statements. At the same time, some social media reports have claimed that oil pipelines had also been damaged in the incident, but the Iranian media quickly denied these reports also. Nevertheless, indications suggest that this was a major and impactful military-related incident. At the time of this report, 70 people have been confirmed dead, 1,072 injured people have been discharged from the hospital, while 120 remain hospitalized. This tragic explosion happened just after Iran and the U.S. had their third round of nuclear talks. The talks in Oman were again conducted by U.S. presidential envoy Steve Witkoff and Iranian Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi. The meeting, that reportedly lasted for several hours on Saturday, included a technical element aimed at the realities of curbing Iran's nuclear program. After the meeting, Iran's foreign minister said that the talks were considerably more serious this time. The next round of talks will continue next week, but it's unclear how long the talks will take. And in other world news, Israel rejected a proposal for a 5-year Gaza ceasefire in exchange for the release of hostages. Major blackouts occurred in Spain, Portugal, and parts of southern France. The blackouts left millions of people without electricity and disrupted their transportation and communication systems. And the Pakistani defense minister reportedly said that there are risks of a war with India within the next 2 to 4 days. This news follows the terrorist attack of Hindus in Kashmir by Islamist terrorists. And in response, FBI Director Kash Patel has pledged his full support for India. Newly released data show that complications of the abortion pill are 22 times higher than what was previously reported. Today, a study that was released by the Ethics and Public Policy Center found that 10.93% of women who had mifepristone abortions experienced severe complications, including sepsis, infection, hemorrhaging, or other serious adverse events within 45 days following the abortion. Mifepristone is the first drug used in a 2-drug medication abortion regimen. 10.93% is significantly higher than the less than 0.5% in clinical trials that is reported on the FDA-approved drug label. Ryan T. Anderson, who is the Ethics and Public Policy Center president, and Jamie Bryan Hall, who is the director of data analysis and a fellow, are the authors of the study. Anderson is a Princeton graduate with a PhD in political science from Notre Dame, and Hall holds a bachelor's and master's degree from Harvard in applied math and statistics. According to the authors, this study is the largest known study of the abortion pill. The study is based on analysis of data from an all-payer insurance claims database that includes 865,727 prescribed mifepristone abortions from 2017 to 2023. This means that the study results are based on real-world incidents. The data was studied by a team of data scientists and analysts and engineers and a clinical team of board-certified obstetricians and gynecologists. The authors suggested that, contrary to what some may claim, the abortion pill is not like Tylenol. We find that 1 out of every 10 women who takes the abortion pill will suffer from a serious adverse event like hemorrhaging or infection soon afterward. A third to a half of these women will then go to the ER or even be hospitalized as a result. In comparison, the current FDA-approved drug label for mifepristone is based on the results of 10 clinical trials with a total of 30,966 participants. This is where less than 0.5% experienced serious adverse events. The current drug label also includes data from as early as 1983. The authors allege that simply stated mifepristone, as used in real-world conditions, is not safe and effective. Our real-world post-market observational study of mifepristone is, to our knowledge, the most comprehensive study of chemical abortion safety ever conducted in the U.S. And that's a wrap for this episode. Thank you so much for your support of Front Page. Please remember to leave a comment below the video. This is really helping us to be seen all around the world. The more people who watch Front Page, the more freedom-loving people the world will have. And please hit the like button and hit the notification bell after you subscribe. And please make sure to share this video with your friends and family, because everybody deserves to know the truth.